Since the 7th of October, we are following minute by minute what's going on in Gaza. And there are serious, relentless efforts by Egypt to put an end to the bloodshed on all levels, whether diplomatic efforts, whether on the political leadership level, on the foreign ministries level, on the humanitarian level, you name it. And world leaders from all over the world were keen to have continuous contacts with Egypt, taking into consideration or into account the very positive, pivotal role by Egypt to play in the Middle East and particularly in this crisis. To shed more light on the Egyptian efforts exerted to put an end, as I said, to the crisis and to help the Palestinians to alleviate the sufferings of the Gazans, we are very much delighted to have with us via phone Her Excellency Ambassador Wafaa Basseem, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Thank you very much for being with us, Ambassador Basseem.
Good morning.
Ambassador Basseem, as I said in my intro, relentless efforts. And a day after the other, you were going to find world leaders keen to have consultations with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi regarding the situation in Gaza. Last but not least, it was Ursula von der Leyen, the EU president, just less than 48 hours ago. Phone calls from French President Emmanuel Macron, a visit by French Defense Minister Lacourneux, and yesterday it was another phone call from Naguib Mikati, Lebanese Prime Minister. How do you see these contacts, ma'am?
I see them as, let's say, I see them as normal and necessary. Why normal? Because you cannot, in this part of the world, in our region, tackle an issue or the other without having the accumulated experience, the wisdom, and the long history of Egypt with all what could happen in the region. While here we don't have only a crisis or a problem or an issue, we have a massacre taking place at our doors, at our frontiers, and not only involving only the Palestinians, but threatening to extend to all the region and to create or to bring the spectrum of the war into the Middle East once again. We are in a situation of war that we cannot call what is happening now in Gaza and subsequently also in the West Bank and in South Lebanon. We cannot call this just attacks or skirmishes. This is a real war, and in Gaza in particular, it's a massacre.
All what's going on is now clear to the whole world, but until the moment, unfortunately, we cannot find the Western leaders saying that all the aggression, the brutal attacks by the Israeli occupation can be justified as self-defense. When they are going to say that clearly, that all what they are doing can never be justified as self-defense?
I think if we follow the development of the language used by most of the leaders of the world now, you will find that this issue or that term of self-defense is sort of feeding a little bit. That does not mean that they are admitting the aggression and the attack, the total attack of Israeli defense machinery towards or war machinery towards Gaza. I think now the whole world, except very few states, are calling for two things: ceasefire, and some of them, those few ones, are talking about a humanitarian truce, and the evacuation or before the evacuation of wounded children, women, and civilian workers of the United Nations as soon as possible, especially the wounded ones, to be treated. And the smooth entrance of the humanitarian aid, food, medications, water, and as requested, of course, the fuel necessary to operate the equipment in hospitals, in schools, and so on and so forth, inside Gaza. The second thing that is now surfacing in the language used by different leaders of the world is how to stop the war, to go back to a negotiating table and to achieve a just solution in the region, in Palestine, by the creation of the two-state solution.
Very well said, Ambassador Wafaa. But could we expect that this can happen with the presence of Benjamin Netanyahu? There are even voices coming from inside Israel saying that the solution of this situation will never be achieved or will never be reached on the ground with the presence of Benjamin Netanyahu as Israeli Prime Minister. Is it Benjamin Netanyahu, or is it the Israeli administration, or the Israeli concepts regarding Hamas, or regarding the situation in Gaza? Or both of them? I don't know.
We almost know, all of us, what is happening, unfortunately. Would it be achievable during the Israeli Prime Minister, who has gone out of any limit, any red lines, any even political thinking, I would say? He is making us all believing that Israel never wanted a peace, never wanted to live in peace and to normalize its relations with its neighbors. How can those Palestinians, children that have seen all these massacres in their childhood, mind you, if any Palestinian child would remain alive, I mean, if they grow up and become those, how do you say, decision makers in Palestine, how would they be able to extend a hand of peace to the Israeli authorities and to start thinking about peace? So that's one point. The other one is that unfortunately, the Prime Minister of Israel is mixing his personal motives with what he calls the interests of Israel, in order to hide and to escape from all charges against him of corruption, of mismanagement, of fraud, of everything. He is creating a motive, a raison d'etre for his leadership in the state of Israel, and he is, of course, supported by a group of extreme rightists in the political Israeli arena.
And it seems that he forgot the massive demonstrations by his own people as he was facing charges of corruption, and he was supporting the judiciary system in his own state. But let's put that aside now and returning back to our Egyptian stance, because our Egyptian stance, whether represented by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli in his press conference, particularly in Al Arish, or by our top diplomat, by Foreign Minister Sameh Shukri. We said it more than once, and from the very first day of the crisis, Egypt is against or expresses all the time full rejection to the displacement of the Palestinian people, whether inside or outside their territories, particularly in neighboring countries, namely Egypt and Jordan. How do you see all the time renewing this stance to send this message clearly to the international community?
I think this started, and even before the peace summit that was held in Cairo, and where President el-Sisi, in his speech, in his inauguration speech, has very clearly stated the principles of Egypt. No forced displacement of the Palestinians in or outside their territories, no liquidation of the Palestinian issue and the Palestinian case on the detriment of other states in the region, and by displacing them. The third thing is, of course, the ceasefire and the humanitarian assistance, and of course that this is only a symptom of the fatalities taking place in the region, but the solution has to be from the roots, which the creation of an Palestinian state with its capital in East Jerusalem. That was repeated again in the joint summit that was held in Riyadh between the Organization of Islamic Countries and the Arab League under the presidency of the actual president of the Arab League and the other organization, OIC, the Saudi Arabia. And one of the most important, let's say, measures to be taken urgently is the tour that...
This was going to be my coming question, Ambassador Wafaa, as today the tour started already with the participation of this committee, which was formed, as you've kindly mentioned, after the Arab Islamic Summit, which took place in Riyadh. And by the way, the ISS Manama Summit, which took place only 2 days ago, also a lot of statements were released by top diplomats, and in addition to Joseph Borrell, the EU commissioner, and they were very important, by the way, and echoing the international community stance right now. But since you mentioned this tour, starting with China, how do you see that the delegation started with China, and they're going to continue with the five permanent members of the Security Council, or the veto countries to be accurate, to make sure that the message reached them clearly?
Well, I'm glad you have mentioned the Manama dialogue under the sponsorship of the International Institute of Strategic Studies that takes place every year in Bahrain to discuss important issues. Unfortunately, though the statements by the officials participating in this dialogue were very strong, but it is not always translated into real measures on the ground. As far as the tour is concerned, today in China, the first round of talks with Beijing, the permanent member of the Security Council, stated clearly again the roadmap that that group of concerned states and interest states, among them Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, we have Nigeria, we have also Indonesia, and Qatar, that are drawing by the representatives of the Secretariat of both the OIC and the Arab League are displaying very clearly what is the aim of this group. Is again to exert pressure to mobilize leaders of the 5 permanent Security Councils and other important states to put an immediate hold to this unprecedented war, unequal war that is taking place in Gaza, and to start thinking about, or not thinking, starting to take measures to stop this massacre and to restore a situation of calm and peace so a solution could be found.
Well, one final question, Ambassador Wafaa, regarding statements released by American President Biden. Biden said that it's time for the Palestinian Authority to take charge of Gaza after the aggression and after, inshallah, the war and the brutal Israeli aggression stops. It's time for the Palestinian Authority to rule the West Bank and Gaza, and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said that they can have a role there in Gaza if we reach the two-state solution, or if the international community succeeded in putting more pressure on Israel for the two-state solution. How do you see these statements released by the American leader?
Well, the American leader or the American outgoing president is of course using the card of the Middle East and the Palestinian-Israeli war or conflict, using it as a card in his campaign for president. The same applies to Mr. Trump, the other candidate to these elections. They are aiming, of course, by this to target the Jewish community in the United States, which, by the way, not all of it is supporting the Israeli government and the Israeli acts taking place and war taking place in Gaza. He's targeting this. At the same time, he's trying to make what you would say a good faith after the complete and overwhelming support that he has given to the Israeli forces in the very first days of the aggression against Gaza, which is now in its day 40. We are at the 43rd day of this. He's trying to give a sort of moderate face again. And I do not understand how he is sort of planning the future of Gaza and the Palestinian state, Palestinian people beforehand and on a unilateral bid without having a consultation with the concerned, who are the Palestinians, who are the Israelis, who are the Egyptians, who are the Lebanese, the Syrians, how he's planning ahead and naming who is going to rule Gaza or rule
Politics,
the West
Ambassador
Bank.
Wafaa. Politics, the game which I'll never be able to understand. Well,
That's
Ambassador
true.
Wafaa, Basseem, former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you very much for your input and have a very good day. We are going to continue covering the situation in Gaza. We are going to continue offering assistance to the Palestinian people. Egypt is going to continue with its massive support to the Palestinians to reach, to achieve and to regain their legal rights to have their independent Palestinian state with Al-Quds as its capital. Let's cross our fingers that tomorrow is going to be a better day and we are going to find this happening on the ground and to have Palestine. Right after the short break, we are going to return back with more. Stay tuned.